Chapter 91. Plop, plop. Upon hearing the sound, Mu Mingcheng's fingers paused on the keyboard. He looked up and saw Gujin's shining eyes boring onto him while her mouth watered noticeably. Look down. You are spilling water, Mu Mingcheng said as the corner of his lips lightly hooked up. Gujin's first reaction was to look at the cup she was holding. Sure enough, the cup was tilted slightly and the water had reached the edge of the cup. I never thought Mr. Mu could be so handsome and appetizing, Gujin said jokingly after she was caught peeping. She placed down her glass of water in front of Mu Mingcheng before sitting on the sofa across from him. You are quite mouth-watering. The man uncrossed his legs, set his computer aside, and reached for the cup of water. After raising the glass to his lips, he asked, Would you like a taste as well? The sofa sank deeper with his movements, and the gap between the folds of his bathrobe widened. The slit reached down to his navel, revealing the firm muscles on his chest and abdomen. Such a posture was quite provocative. Underneath the sunlight, the water stains on his lips glistened, adding a seductive touch. The most honest reaction was Gujin's increased salivation at this moment. On most days, Mu Mingcheng's is very calm and mild. People who see him at first sight are often attracted by this temperament. This temperament weakened his appearance's influence, making him more low-key. Of course, there will still be obsessed admirers who are attracted to his appearance at first glance. However, he was a different man tonight. His clothes were scattered, and his face, without putting up a pretense, revealed a young man's sharp temperament. But this made him even more enticing. He leaned against the sofa like a lazy cat waiting for his master to scratch him. At present, Gujin unconsciously stole 2 more glances at the suggestive scenery, but her willpower eventually prevailed and she retracted her gaze. No, I have a bad appetite. I am afraid I won't be able to digest it. Oh, Mu Mingcheng chuckled. That is good. I can go to bed at ease. He stood up abruptly, bypassed the tea table in front of the sofa, and stood before Gujin. He looked down as his eyes bore into her. After a few seconds, he looked away. Right in front of Gujin, he drew up his bathrobe and securely fastened the belt, resuming a neat appearance. Hey, I'm really not hungry, okay? That evening, Gujin had a dream. In her dream, she became a very hungry rabbit, but she was very disciplined and principled. She firmly refused to taste that clump of grass. I won't eat it, I won't eat it, I really won't. The fat and delicious grass nodded obediently. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a big orange carrot, which she couldn't resist stuffing in her mouth. Gujin woke up abruptly after that scene. She sat up quite stunned for a few minutes. Am I really that hungry? Shocked by her own ideas, Gujin shook her head. It was too terrible to think about. Chapter 92. After sitting for a while, Gujin patted her face, then got up to get dressed. I'll just head out and take a look around for some hot foreigners. When she finished changing, she opened the door to find that the table was already set. Mu Mingcheng had long been dressed and was now sitting on the couch with a newspaper in hand. Something seems to be different about him today. He was wearing a black shirt while his fringe was parted away from his forehead, his thick black hair styled in a comb-over, giving him a strong masculine aura. As soon as Gujin came out, Mu Mingcheng stood up and sat by the dining table. His eyes took her up, then down, before commenting, You look good today. It was as if the sun was rising from the west. Gujin doubtfully looked down at the long English dress she was wearing. The long dress was specially prepared for her outing. It was slightly different from her usual style, but it did not seem like a new look to her. After dinner, the couple walked out of the elevator and was greeted by Assistant Fang, along with some other unfamiliar faces. Those elite men did not move much. They simply nodded back. Everything was going just as usual, but what annoyed Gujin was how Assistant Fang stared at her with such enthusiasm. Even the smile on his face was strange and irksome. But he was oblivious to her displeasure. Assistant Fang watched as the couple walked out of the elevator like a golden pair, without even realizing that his grin was as obvious as a blooming chrysanthemum. Others were unaware of the status quo, but as Mu Mingcheng's personal assistant, Mr. Fan was clear about the relationship between his boss and Miss Gu. Knowing the details, he had to admit that his boss's methods were underhanded. Their relationship was only contractual, since he used her family heirloom to threaten her to be his girlfriend. If he had offered the contract to a woman who desires to climb a dragon to become a phoenix, then that woman would have been pleased with his offer. But if the other party was someone temperamental, having her stay as your girlfriend was the same as a double-edged sword. When Miss Gu agreed to Mu Mingcheng's request, Assistant Fang had secretly despised her in his heart. But it turned out that she was different from what he initially assumed, so his attitude towards her changed completely. After some analysis and reflection, he sincerely hoped that his boss can truly start a relationship with Miss Gu. His boss had never had such emotions and is inexperienced. He also wasn't good at saying his feelings. If someday his boss is angered and breaks up with Miss Gu, Assistant Fan doesn't know how to deal with the aftermath. The key item that brought the young man and woman together was the bracelet. The sooner the jade bracelet is returned to Miss Gu, the better. Otherwise, the longer the time before it's given back, the deeper the thorn. Someday, if the two of them start to have feelings for each other, Assistant Fang was afraid that their calculative dealings with each other will become a thorn, causing them to suspect that the other's feelings isn't sincere. He wasn't fully aware of his boss' experience these past few years when he took over the company. He only knew that it was miserable. Assistant Fang witnessed how hard Mu Mingcheng worked these past 3 years to overcome one trial after another. As a close subordinate, he hopes that his boss will find someone who understands him, but things seem to have changed. He clearly saw it last night. His boss and Gu Jin entered the same room. If a lonely man and woman enters a room, and even more so, if they were in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, what could happen? Hey, isn't that natural? As long as they solidify their relationship, why should he be afraid that they close off their emotions? No one was aware of Assistant Fang's attentive thoughts. Meanwhile, to Gu Jin's dismay, her plans to shop and sightsee hot foreign men all vanished into thin air. The whole matter of accompanying him for business was just a waste of time. While Mu Mingcheng dined with the company he had business dealings with, Gu Jin was forced to sit on a corner and listen to their conversations. What made her feel self-doubt was how she was able to understand what everyone was saying, but for some reason, she did not know what to say to the group once they come together. Why is that? Feeling bored and annoyed, Gu Jin rested her chin on one hand while she glanced at Mu Mingcheng, who indifferently spoke with the foreign country's language. When Mu Mingcheng refused a toast, the group no longer offered him wine. Instead, they praised him for taking care of his body, along with his country's health practices. Chapter 93. When Mu Mingcheng refused a toast, the group no longer offered him wine. Instead, they praised him for taking care of his body, along with his country's health practices. Gu Jin sneered to herself. What does that have to do with paying attention to health? Instead, the man was staying away from potential trouble by refusing that wine. He must have learned this by experience. When one is abroad, it's not as easy dealing with an emergency compared to when one is at home. It's been said that men at work are the most attractive, but most men were idle. Gu Jin wasn't sure if it was because of her dream, but for some reason, whenever she glanced at Mu Mingcheng from this angle, his well-spoken words and sharp aura made him more beautiful and elegant. To her, he was just like a mouth-watering carrot. Oh my God, no way! Gu Jin leaned against the window, her eyes wandering with the fleeting scenery outside. From an outsider's point of view, her eyes looked empty without feeling. It was hard to guess what she was thinking. Stop, let's get off from here. The car stopped in front of a pedestrian walkway, and Mu Mingcheng opened the door. What's the matter? Gu Jin got off the car with her purse. Since her plans to look around for handsome foreigners vanished into thin air, she felt remorse for sticking around Mu Mingcheng all day. If it were not for the sake of not embarrassing him in front of outsiders, she would have long ignored his thoughts and gone out to play by herself. And Mu Mingcheng, who sabotaged her plans, dared to make other arrangements today. Did not you want to go shopping? The man's authentic handmade leather shoes touched the ground. He ordered his assistant. You may head back first. I can show her around. Gu Jin looked up at Mu Mingcheng with disbelief. He's going shopping with me? Since you accompanied me for my meeting, I'll accompany you with your shopping. The man explained when he saw her doubtful expression. He raised a brow and added, Don't think about it too much. It's an equal exchange. You did not have to, Gu Jin pouted. She would be more comfortable if she had gone shopping alone and enjoyed tea to herself. If he came with her, how could she get a chance to hook up with a foreign hunk? The other assistants got on the bus and left sensibly. Only the driver, Lao Liu, was left behind sitting in Mu Mingcheng's exclusive car while waiting on the couple. After visiting several shops, the unsatisfied Gu Jin began to feel a little thirsty. Wait here. I'll buy you water. As he looked at the crowded vending machines, Mu Mingcheng insisted that Gu Jin stay at her spot while he got in line to fetch a water bottle for her. The foreigners in this country were generally taller than people from Zig country, but as Gu Jin stared at Mu Mingcheng's back, the man was still very eye-catching and tall as he stood within this crowd. Hello, miss, a stranger greeted behind Gu Jin. He spoke to her using the Zig country's language, but with a different accent. Gu Jin turned around and saw a man of about 30 years old holding a traveling bag on his back. It was a pleasure to meet people from the same Z country here in a foreign country. Hello, Gu Jin replied with a gentle smile. Actually, the man smiled in embarrassment as he explained, My wallet was stolen along with my cell phone. Can you lend me your phone so I can call my friend to ask him to come and pick me up? Sure, Gu Jin said. It was such bad luck for this guy to encounter a thief in a foreign country. She did not mind lending her phone to a fellow citizen. Great, the man smiled lightly and reached for her cell phone. However, upon seeing the calluses on his broad palm, Gu Jin's eyes flashed. I am sorry. Gu Jin suddenly retracted her hand and said regretfully, My cell phone doesn't have battery, so it turns off without warning at times. Gu Jin raised her phone to show the man the black screen. My boyfriend is over there, she said as she pointed to the crowd towards the vending machine's direction. You wait here. I'll have him come over to help you. The man's expression stiffened for a moment, but he quickly recovered his expression. Thank you then. You are welcome, Gu Jin replied with a smile and nodded lightly. She steadily walked towards the vending machine. Before she could reach his side, Mu Mingcheng's instincts caused him to look in her direction. Her pupils seemed a little shaky, and her smile was unusually stiff. On a closer look, he noticed that her hand trembled as it held the cell phone to her chest. Her lips moved as she mouthed a few words to him. Mu Mingcheng silently smiled and waved to her. As soon as she reached his side, he grabbed her arm before quickly rushing into a door. At that same moment, gunshots reverberated on the streets. The crowd was in a frenzy with screaming and wailing. Who was it? Gu Jin asked solemnly. Not sure. Mu Mingcheng pulled out a small revolver out of nowhere. Gu Jin wiped her lips and refrained from speaking. She couldn't risk distracting him during this critical moment. In the silence, Gu Jin suddenly heard a bang before she was tossed to the ground, disoriented. The police sirens were getting closer, but she paid no attention to it, as if the surrounding sounds were all drowned out at this moment. She could only feel a man's moist chest against her hand. Chapter 94. The man's dark western coat was damp. Gu Jin dazedly lifted her hands as she stared the bright red stain. Mingcheng? Gu Jin called out his name in a shaky whisper. The man's heavy body was pressed against her, making it difficult for her to breathe. But although she was uncomfortable, she dared not move a muscle. She even tried to control her breathing so that she barely made a sound. Gu Jin was afraid that if she disturbed Mu Mingcheng's wound, he would end up bleeding more profusely. Gu Jin placed her hand on his shoulder and she raised her voice a little more. Mu Mingcheng? Still no response. It was as if her heart was pricked by a needle. Her eyes began to tear up. This was the first time Gu Jin had the impulse to cry ever since crossing over to this novel world. Her hands trembled as she called out Mu Mingcheng's name again and again. The scene was quickly put under control. There were some who pointed to Gu Jin and Mu Mingcheng, and they approached the fallen couple on the ground. Upon seeing their condition, they couldn't help but feel bewildered, not knowing what to say. You save him. Gu Jin's voice was hoarse as her tears fell. Save him now. But no one came forward to help. Gu Jin tensed up in worry, and her hand tightened around Mu Mingcheng. Why did he cover for her? What was their relationship? Was she worth his sacrifice? Cough. Mu Mingcheng suddenly opened his eyes and weakly said, Don't cry, it's okay. I won't die. He used to suffer more serious injuries than this, and wasn't he still alive? You are awake? Gu Jin's tears stopped, but the makeup she painstakingly applied was now a mess. She looked disheveled at the moment, but Mu Mingcheng felt that she was most beautiful at this time. He replied as he slowly closed his eyes. But woman, he turned to her and said with a pained smile, If you squeeze my shoulder tighter, I'll probably die of pain. Before he could say more, his chest jerked, and blood began to trickle out once again. Gu Jin glared at him angrily for joking at such a serious time, but his humor meant that his wound shouldn't be too serious. She breathed a sigh of relief. Gu Jin loosened her hand around Mu Mingcheng's shoulder, only to find a bloody hole underneath. Frightened by the sight, she quickly removed her hand and scolded, Why did not you tell me earlier? She's been pressing against his shoulder so tightly, wouldn't that exacerbate the wound? Mu Mingcheng closed his eyes, not knowing whether to speak or remain silent. Mr. Mu, Lao Lu squeezed through the crowd and rushed over. After seeing the situation at a glance, his usually gentle face suddenly turned sharp. It was completely different from his usual image. After surveying the vicinity, Lao Lu quickly helped Mu Mingcheng up and off of Gu Jin. Miss Gu, Mr. Mu's injury isn't critical, he said as he hurriedly inspected Mu Mingcheng's injuries. I'll be sending him to the hospital for treatment. Okay, Gu Jin calmed down and nodded. Let's go quickly. The longer they delay, the more blood is lost. Even if he wasn't in much pain, it wouldn't be good to lose too much blood. At this time, the ambulance sirens sounded. The crowd was evacuated, and the site was immediately blocked from pedestrians. Gu Jin wiped her forehead and followed the team closely. At a corner away from everyone's sight, a man carrying a traveling bag stared at the departing ambulance. He threw his bag on the ground and cursed, Shit. Bro, you are not so skilled after all. You can't even deal with a delicate young woman. A man wearing a black hoodie, pants, and a matching baseball cap walked towards him from across the street. He whistled teasingly and said, I've already completed my task. Oh, the man with the backpack sneered in reply. But he was saved in the end, wasn't he? Kay, it's too early for you to say that your task is finished. Chapter 95. It's easy for him to be rescued, but keeping his life will be much more difficult, shrugged the man who was dressed in black. The fact that I was able to land a bullet on him is enough to make a name for myself among those of my trade. The reason why Kay accepted the job was because he caught a glimpse of Mu Mingcheng's photo on the internet. Although Mu Mingcheng's current appearance was quite different from a few years ago, Kay could still recognize this man, even if his body turned into ashes. That is because Kay was once chased without a hiding place by him, so he planned to assassinate Mu Mingcheng no matter what it takes and regardless of the consequences. Landing a bullet on the former king of firearms is the proudest accomplishment for Kay in this lifetime. Don't you want money? The man with the backpack said as he squinted his eyes. Think about it, replied Kay in black as he turned towards the wooden warehouse. In the blink of an eye, the gun disappeared to who knows where. He casually said, I only landed a bullet. Mu Mingcheng, so then my employer simply doesn't pay me as part of the agreement. He continued, but for you, it's different. After today, Mu Mingcheng will certainly not appear so easily in front of others again. He raised the eaves of his hat to reveal his chilling gaze. In your case, if you can't kill the target, you have no way of dealing with your master. Don't forget, you still haven't finished off that woman yet. I don't have any interest for a woman who's powerless, Kay said with a chuckle. It doesn't matter if my employer pays half his fortune for it. In any case, you'd better worry about yourself. They both had different employers, but they shared the same mission. Kay was in a cooperative relationship with his employer, so if the agreement isn't fulfilled on either side, the whole contract collapses. But it's different for the other hitman. He will be punished if he fails his task. In the past, Kay never bothered paying attention to these lower-skilled men, but who would have thought that their employers would join hands? Kay could only sigh helplessly. If he wasn't cooperating with such a useless pig teammate, he would have long sent Mu Mingcheng to see the king of the underworld. But the results for now were satisfactory. Even if Mu Mingcheng was sent to the brink of death, a man like him who licked blood on the knife's edge would never fear those who come for him. The next morning, Gujin sat on a chair in the VIP ward of Country Izhas First Hospital, carefully peeling fruits. The sky was cloudy, with a few instances of sunlight seeping through the window and entering the room. The sunshine sprinkled on Gujin's white and tender face. Her complexion was so fair that one could count the fine hair on her skin. She held the apple while her slender fingers turned the fruit knife. Within a minute, a clean and neatly peeled apple was presented in her hands. Time leisurely flowed and shallow breathing sounds could be heard. When Mu Mingcheng opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was this indescribable scene. He couldn't help but feel choked from emotion. For some unknown reason, he thought back to that tranquil night. She had also been as gentle and refined as now. But unlike today, she had a fake smile on her face at that time. As he pondered, Mu Mingcheng realized something. It seemed that Gujin had never been sincere towards him in the past. He shouldn't have grown feelings for her, and he kept telling himself not to. But now, Mu Mingcheng had a tinge of regret. Yes, when he chose to protect Gujin with his body, he immediately regretted. Since Mu Mingcheng had been gazing at her for so long, Gujin eventually noticed his stare. Are you awake? Gujin looked up at him and smiled. Chapter 96. Are you awake? Gujin looked up at him and smiled. The doctor said that Mu Mingcheng's body was in excellent condition and that his injury was far from fatal. There was no problem as long as he doesn't catch a fever. Since some blood was lost, the man also needed to recover some more. Mu Mingcheng can leave the hospital in about 10 days' time, after which he can safely recover at home. Gujin placed the peeled apple on a fruit bowl with other sliced apples. The surface of the fruit had already changed color since it was exposed to the air. Apples of different shades were neatly arranged on the dish, creating a kind of inexplicable joy. Yes, Mu Mingcheng replied in a hoarse voice. Just a little thirsty. His face was very pale while his lips were cracked. Wait a minute, Gujin helped him sit up before turning around to pour him a glass of water. However, Mu Mingcheng did not lift his hand to receive the cup. He merely stared at the glass of water, before looking up at Gujin. I almost forgot about your injury. Gujin seemed conflicted as she stared back at him. Would you like me to feed you? As soon as she spoke, she wished she could take her words back. Helping him drink could be too intimate of an action between them. Forget it, I'll call a nurse. You feed me, he said. After hearing his request, Gujin had to sit at the edge of the bed before placing the glass against Mu Mingcheng's lips. The man must really be thirsty. Just when the cup pressed against his lips, Mu Mingcheng took several greedy gulps. That, coupled with Gujin's lack of skill in placing the cup, caused some water to spill out. Slow down. Gujin took out a piece of paper towel and wiped off the moisture. She scolded him and said, Don't choke on it. What if he coughs violently and tears his wound open? Wouldn't he end up bleeding again? Mu Mingcheng remained silent after her reprimand. It was rare for him to not argue back. Instead, he patiently began to sip his water. Seeing his proper behavior, Gujin surprisingly thought he was a bit cute. It was as if she was raising a child into someone obedient and sensible. But can the two words obedient and sensible really describe someone like Mu Mingcheng? After drinking water, Mu Mingcheng closed his eyes. In order not to disturb his rest, Gujin sat away a little further. When she reached for the fruit tray once again, she realized that she had cut so many apples without paying attention. Gujin awkwardly reached for a freshly cut apple and took a bite as if nothing had happened. The apple was juicy and sweet. Chomp, chomp, she couldn't resist another bite. I want to eat fruit, Mu Mingcheng said as he opened his eyes. Gujin took another bite before replying, Okay. She picked up the knife and cut the apple into smaller pieces, then found 2 toothpicks which she inserted into the bite-sized slices. Gujin sat next to the patient. The apple's juice stained Mu Mingcheng's thin, pale lips, causing them to glisten. Gujin unconsciously licked her own lips. In fact, among all kinds of handsome men, her favorite type was a frail and beautiful man. Although Mu Mingcheng had to recuperate on a hospital bed, his infirmities still couldn't hide his attractive appearance. On the contrary, it seemed to provoke the onlooker's inner wolf. giving others the impulse to cruelly ravage him. Feeling her heart beat loudly, Gujin closed her eyes to hide away her uncontrollable thoughts. Mu Mingcheng, who had been quietly observing her, had seen it all. The corner of his lips lifted to an almost unnoticeable smile. "Miss Gu, here's your breakfast." Assistant Fang opened the door and said with surprise, "Mr. Mu, you finally woke up." Mu Mingcheng wasn't touched at all by his subordinate's concern. His face darkened as he wondered, wasn't this assistant supposed to be tactful? Gu Jin finally stood up. She has been in a bad mood for a while now. There were many times when she wanted to call for someone to come and feed him, but she couldn't bring herself to do it when she thought of how Mu Mingcheng protected her. At this time, Assistant Fang's appearance undoubtedly saved her the trouble. That was why Gu Jin laughed happily at his entrance. Meanwhile, Assistant Fang was puzzled by her reaction. But he thought not more of it and dutifully reported to Mu Mingcheng. "You may not know this, Mr. Mu, but Miss Gu has not closed her eyes the entire night, so she could take care of you." After saying so, he looked to Gu Jin with an appreciative smile. Chapter 97. Assistant Fang thought to himself, "Miss Gu, you must grab this opportunity. By taking this chance to take care of boss, you'll be able to break free of the contract sooner. Don't forget to say a few good words for me in front of my boss once you become the famed Mrs. Mu." As he thought of these, his smile became more gentle. "Mr. Mu, Miss Gu is a good example of a caring girlfriend," complimented Assistant Fang, who seldom had the courage to express his views to an overbearing character like Mu Mingcheng. After years of observation, his sixth sense told him that he may have offended his boss. Afraid of what might come, his intuition prompted him to compliment Gu Jin. However, the other party was unexpectedly in a bad mood. Gu Jin's friendly smile immediately froze, and she even gritted her teeth. Why has not she noticed before that Assistant Fang was such a blabbermouth? Although what he said was true, Gu Jin did not like it. Gu Jin stiffly smiled and said, "Assistant Fang's words are too exaggerated. It's just a small matter, not worth mentioning." Unlike Gu Jin, Mu Mingcheng, who leaned against the bed, had his mood changed from cloudy to sunny. His dark glare on Assistant Fang dissipated. It seems like this assistant of his still had a good vision. Feeling pleased, Mu Mingcheng turned to Gu Jin with a faint grin. He looked carefully, and sure enough, there were not so obvious dark circles around the corners of her eyes. Noticing the man's stare, Gu Jin turned to him and unnaturally brushed her hair behind her ear. She explained to him, "You saved me. I am not someone so heartless. Shouldn't I take care of you in return?" Mu Mingcheng smiled without saying a word. His eyes followed Gu Jin's hands and then to her earlobes as she pushed away her beautiful hair. Although they were now staying at the hospital's VIP ward, the conditions here couldn't compare to the hotel they stayed in earlier. Since Gu Jin cared for Mu Mingcheng's health, she hadn't slept well the whole night. She did not have energy to keep going, and her condition wasn't in good shape. For her hygiene this morning, she was only able to have a simple wash and rinse. Her tender and delicate face had a light amount of makeup, and her thin earlobes were pale under the morning light. Her long hair that was usually styled neatly was now slightly messy. She was like a cat that has not had its fur brushed properly. Mu Mingcheng had an impulse to embrace this cat and comb it. The man's eyes bent into half crescents as he smiled. He knew how much Gu Jin valued her appearance. She usually did not wear makeup to cover up her complexion, and she did not allow herself to lose her image in front of outsiders. But, with her current appearance, it seems that he still held some importance to her. Mu Mingcheng's fingers fidgeted under the blanket. He had the urge to ruffle her hair, but because of the wound on his chest, his slight movement caused him sharp pain. Mu Mingcheng's face suddenly paled, and he gave a slight grunt. He had experienced more serious wounds in the past, so the pain was still tolerable. And since he was in front of a woman he pursued, he only wanted to show his masculine side. "What's wrong?" Gu Jin worriedly stared at the cold sweat on his brow. "It's all right. I am just hungry," Mu Mingcheng said with a smile. His intentions were quite obvious. Gu Jin looked to Assistant Fan, who seemed as if he was trying to disappear into the background as he avoided her gaze. She took a deep breath, forced a smile, and picked up the porridge. "Just endure. This man saved my life." Chapter 98. After helping Mu Mingcheng snack on fruits and some water, she wondered if she should also feed him a bowl of congee. Gu Jin warned herself not to hold the bowl of porridge too close in case she accidentally drops it on him. What would she do if his injuries were exacerbated? When the bowl of congee was emptied, the doorbell rang once again. Instead of going to the door, Gu Jin shouted, "Please come in." "Boss." The driver, Old Lu, came in and nodded towards Gu Jin, before facing Mu Mingcheng. "Did you find out who did it?" Mu Mingcheng glanced coldly at Assistant Fang and asked. It's been a long time since he had suffered a loss this big. The opposing party concealed their tracks very well, so we were not able to find out. Old Lu stood upright and reported dutifully, but it's certain that one of them is a professional killer. This man did not behave like an ordinary driver at all. Gu Jin wasn't surprised. Ever since that day when Old Lu drove her to the Jing banquet under Mu Mingcheng's arrangements, Gu Jin had already guessed that his identity wasn't simple. He said that he had been working for Mu Mingcheng for 5 years, while Mr. Mu himself had inherited the Mu company only 3 years ago. For those extra 2 years, Mu Mingcheng was still making contributions towards the country. And when Mu Mingcheng was rescued from danger and brought to the hospital, old Liu asked her many questions about the situation at that time. His thorough questions and attention to detail are certainly beyond what an ordinary driver would consider. Because he was present during that difficult time, Gu Jin felt assured about their safety. But when she heard him report about a professional killer, her heart remained in a state of awe. If she recalled it correctly, Mu Mingcheng shielded her from the gunshot. Otherwise, the one lying in this hospital bed would have been her. Or she might have served tea to Yan Wang yesterday instead. So someone purposely plotted to assassinate her? This guess caused Gu Jin's feet to turn cold. She had unconsciously created a fierce enemy for herself. Was it Xiao Chong, Cheng Xin? Or perhaps Jing Hao? No, that's impossible. Xiao Chong was born again and still had delusions of pursuing the original host, so he wouldn't be responsible. Cheng Xin doesn't have the resources to stage an assassination. As for Jing Hao, Gu Jin guessed his names a few times, but eventually excluded him from her list. Although she had humiliated Jing Hao, he was still a man who was proud and conceited. If he wanted to retaliate, he will choose to do it openly in front of the person. He certainly wouldn't strike back in the shadows. So who was the enemy behind the scenes? The original novel revolved around the male and female protagonists, but there were a few supporting roles around them. Mu Mingcheng went abroad during this period, but whether he was assassinated or not in the book remained unknown. Moreover, since she crossed over to this world and Xiao Chong had a rebirth, the original novel had already long lost its value as a reference. While Gu Jin contemplated, Mu Mingcheng was already relaying his orders. There are 2 suspects. One of the killers must be K. Go arrange someone to check what recent task he just received. Yes. Old Liu left afterwards. Ah, Mu Mingcheng made a low laugh. His face revealed a chilling aura that couldn't be erased. It seems that he has been away from Jianghu for too long. Some people have forgotten who he was exactly and even dared to lift a finger against him. Upon seeing his expression, Gu Jin had some guesses. Although Mu Mingcheng did not say who the culprit was, both of them had a particular person in mind. Mr. Mu, would you like to inform your parents, Mr. and Mrs. Mu? Assistant Fine asked. All right, Mu Mingcheng replied. I want them to be prepared for what's to come. His gaze turned to Gu Jin. Chapter 99. 5 days later, under Mu Mingcheng's firm orders, their group embarked on their journey back to their home country. Mu Mingcheng had already discussed certain business issues with Y Country and expressed his respect for their company. He emphasized the importance of their business dealings held and assured that the rest of the work can be completed by his elite team. As for his physical injury, 5 days were enough for his wounds to scab. As long as he was careful and did not strain himself too much, he could go back safely to his country and recuperate. Gu Jin advised him to wait a couple of days before leaving, but Mu Mingcheng insisted that there wasn't any time to delay. If he returned late and the hidden clues were erased, wouldn't he end up suffering a hidden loss? It's best to head back to the grasslands and catch the snake by surprise, so that the enemy in the shadows wouldn't have time to rest. Seeing how insistent Mu Mingcheng was, Gu Jin went ahead to ask the doctor for advice. The doctor said that his wounds only needed a bit more time to heal, so traveling by plane should be just fine. Gu Jin sighed in relief. Thankfully, Mu Mingcheng's parents quickly prepared a medical team to accompany him after they found out that their son was recently a target for assassination. Shortly after, a private jet arrived. According to Assistant Fang, the private jet was specially arranged by Mu Mingcheng's parents for fear that those behind the scenes haven't given up in their goals to kill Mu Mingcheng and Gu Jin. In order to ensure their son's safety, Father Mu used his relations abroad to arrange this. Even the flight attendants had each undergone thorough background checks. Gu Jin had only seen what a private jet looked like on TV during both her past and present life. She was surprised to find out that they would be able to ride a private plane on the way home. When she saw the jet personally for the first time, she felt as if her legs had gone soft. Previously, when Gu Jin flew out of the country for the first time, she had no idea that her body had an instinctive fear of heights, so she wasn't afraid to board the plane. But ever since she peered out of the window on her first flight and discovered her acrophobia, she found that her stomach began to feel uncomfortable before she has even stepped foot inside the plane. Standing behind Gu Jin were several tall bodyguards sent by the Mu family. They seemed to be waiting for her to go up before following her into the cabin. Gu Jin gritted her teeth and went up the stairs. When she finally mustered the courage to step on the ladder, a voice sounded from the entrance of the plane. Old Liu, you go and give her a hand. Mu Mingcheng sat on a wheelchair with Old Liu right behind him. There were several layers of thick gauze wrapped around his chest. His broad suit could only be draped over his shoulders. After several days of treatment and recuperation, his face was still slightly pale and he seemed to lack strength. Yes. Old Liu let go of the chair and got off the plane to approach Gu Jin. Miss Gu, excuse me for troubling you. Gu Jin raised her head. The sun shone brightly in the sky, making it difficult to see the expression of that man inside the plane. She squinted and whispered to Old Liu, Thank you. Gu Jin's trembling legs and uncomfortable stomach eased a lot with his support. In fact, psychologically speaking, Gu Jin wasn't afraid of flying. To her frustration, it was this body's instinctual fear that was too strong to suppress. Chapter 100. Gu Jin arrived at the entrance of the plane with a pale face. Right when she entered, a powerful hand reached out and grasped her arm, exactly at the spot where old Liu held her earlier for balance. Mu Mingcheng took Gu Jin's hand and looked down at his chest that was wrapped in gauze. He looked back at her helplessly and asked, "Wheelchair, please, little Jin?" At his words, Gu Jin's heartbeat accelerated again. She did not know why, but although the name Little Jin was normal to her, somehow, having Mu Mingcheng call her that seemed to give her goosebumps. Mu Mingcheng calmly confronted her, and there was a subtle feeling in the air. Suddenly, Gu Jin smiled and replied, "All right." She took the wheelchair and neatly pushed it inside. There were not a lot of people on the plane. Besides the 2 passengers, there were also a few bodyguards and attendants, so there was still a lot of space left on the plane. Gu Jin and Mu Mingcheng had a small room to themselves to rest on the plane. After they were settled, the plane was ready to take off. When it began to lift into the air, Gu Jin began to feel nauseous, and her chest felt tight. Only the 2 of them were in their private room. Mu Mingcheng sat in the middle of a wide bed. His wounds had yet to fully heal, so his face paled. When Gu Jin saw his state, pushed aside her complaints and sat down next to him while carefully caressing his wounded chest. "Are you afraid?" Mu Mingcheng took her hand and looked up at her as he asked. He remembered their time at the hospital when she couldn't sit still. His loose hair covered his deep gaze. There was an imperceptible tenderness in his expression as he turned all his attention to Gu Jin. "I am all right." Gu Jin saw him take her hands slowly. She felt slightly displeased. Why was Mu Mingcheng taking liberties with her again? The 2 chatted together, and soon it was dinner time. Seeing how fatigued Gu Jin was today, Mu Mingcheng did not ask her to feed him this time. However, he did not call for anyone else to serve him. The man lifted his arm carefully, without pulling the wound on his chest. Gu Jin enjoyed a light supper in the dining room, but then sleep became a problem by the time she came back. The attendants outside sat on their seats for the time being. For these past few days, Gu Jin feared that an assassin could be lurking around the hospital, so she wasn't able to sleep well recently. Now that they've left that dangerous place, her mood was relieved to an extent, but her fear of heights did not allow her to rest completely. However, there was only 1 bed in the room. There wasn't even a sofa. "Rest assured," Mu Mingcheng said as he lazily leaned against the bedside. He smiled lightly as he lifted his injured arm. "I can't do anything to you in this state. I am afraid you'll be the beast attacking me at night." Afterwards, he lifted a brow as if to hint about something. "Haha, there's no way I'd do it with a patient who doesn't have the ability." Gu Jin's face was stiff. She recalled their first day on YYY country when Mu Mingcheng wore a bathrobe with a mouth-watering appearance. Meanwhile, Mu Mingcheng's face turned black when he was told he did not have the ability.